this episode of On Subrogation, we're going to discuss claims that arise from damages caused by falling trees. I'm Jason Sullivan of Rathbone Group, and it's surprising how often trees fall and actually cause damage. Whether it's falling on an insured's car, their home, or maybe their business, these claims will come across your desk, and it's important to realize that there may be subrogation potential. So what are the things you need to do to analyze whether or not there is a potential to subrogate on one of these claims? The first thing is, who owns the land where the tree was before it fell? Now, in some cases, this may be very clear, but because tree falling cases, for them to fall and damage someone else's property, they're more likely close to the property line. And if you have a defendant or person who's denying ownership of the tree, it may be required to get a property line survey done so you know exactly where that line is and what side of the line the tree was on. The last thing you want to do is go through an entire case, do all the investigation, and then realize the tree was located on your insured's property and there's no subrogation potential. Once you know who the owner is, then the next thing is whether or not the tree was in a dangerous or defective condition. Now, the best evidence of this is photographs before the tree fell. If those photographs show that there are no leaves when you'd expect there to be leaves, or maybe all the leaves are brown during the summertime when you'd expect trees of that kind to have green leaves, or there's photographs that show a limb or a branch leaning, or bark broken, or rot or decay, that would indicate that the tree was dangerous or defective before it fell, and maybe that's the reason why it fell. Now, if you don't have photographic evidence beforehand, you may have it after the tree falls. And if you don't have any photographs at all, then you may need to rely on just witness testimony. Now, if you're insured as the property owner where it was damaged and they reside or work at that location, they probably have a good idea and present recollection of what the tree condition was. If you're insured as a landlord and they're renting out the place, now your best witness may be the tenant, with whom you don't have a policy of insurance and you may not have a working relationship with to get the information you really need. Worst case scenario is your insured's just traveling through an area and a tree falls on their car. If they have no familiarity with the area, what the tree was like before it fell, maybe even after what it was like because they left the area and didn't go back, that is a more difficult case. So ideally you have photographic evidence that shows the condition of the tree, but if not, you try and rely on witness statements. Now, once you prove that the tree was in a dangerous or defective condition, now you have to prove that there's negligence on the part of the landowner. There's no strict liability. Just because a tree fell doesn't mean somebody's responsible. And this goes right to regular common law negligence rules. And it used to be that a landowner had no duty for natural conditions on their land. So a landowner didn't have to do anything about their trees. However, that's changed over the time, and now it's really a distinction of where the land is located. So in more rural areas, a landowner still doesn't have a duty to search or inspect their land. However, if the landowner has knowledge, actual knowledge of a defective condition or a dangerous tree, they have a duty to remedy that. So if a landowner drives by on his road out of his farm every day and sees a tree that's precariously leaning over the roadway, and they see that every day, they have actual knowledge. Now, a lot of times, landowners, it would be easy for them to deny having any knowledge at all. So in those cases, you're going to rely on, did somebody put them on notice of that fact? And preferably, was it in writing and can you prove it? Did your insured write them a letter warning them of the tree and asking them to take care of it so it didn't damage their property? Maybe the county or the state put them on notice of a tree and said you need to take care of this as the property owner. If you can find evidence of that kind of written notification, that's great evidence to show the person was on actual knowledge of that fact. Now, in more urban areas, it's changed. You have to prove either that the landowner had actual knowledge or that they had constructive knowledge. So actual knowledge is the same as it is in the rural cases. Constructive knowledge merely requires a showing that the person should have. A reasonable landowner would have or should have noticed that there was a defective condition or a dangerous tree on their property, and a reasonable person would have taken action to correct or remedy that, to prevent the harm from happening. Again, you're going to look for pictures. Did anybody see that tree leaning? Are all the leaves dead on it? And the landowner should have known that tree was dead, and maybe they should have known that it was in danger of falling down. That's the evidence that you're going to look for to prove either actual, that they really did know themselves, subjective knowledge, or that a reasonable person would have known, the objective knowledge, the constructive knowledge. So the defenses that arise, aside from the common law, just regular negligence defenses, you're going to have people claim, one, they weren't the property owner, which again, the best evidence to refute that's going to be a property line survey. The other will be that they claim that the tree wasn't in a dangerous or defective condition. And a lot of times this comes up through the act of God defense. And this can be a compelling defense even though it's probably used more than it's really applicable. So the act of God defense says it wasn't through the fault of the landowner that the loss happened. It was because of some extreme event, an earthquake, a hurricane, a tornado, an extreme storm. Those are the types of things that happen, natural disasters you might call them, that cause this otherwise perfectly healthy tree to fall down, and it's through no fault of the owner of the land that that tree fell. Now, the issue really comes up with high wind. So a tornado, yes, we can all agree, there's probably no notice or knowledge or anything a landowner could do about that. But it's windy, and it's windy in a lot of places a lot of times of the year. So what happens if an extremely high gust of wind, not an extreme wind situation, but just a gust of wind and a tree comes down? So in those cases, you're going to need to look at what are the weather patterns. Are you looking at something that's a 10-year, a 20-year, a 50-year storm event? Or are you looking at a wind condition that maybe it doesn't happen every day, maybe it's only once a month or just a couple of times a year, but that's a condition that exists and is known to exist in that area. The more likely that it's known to exist, the more likely that there's a duty on the landowner to take precaution and prevent that risk. And finally, the defense would be, I didn't have knowledge. And again, if you're in a situation where you have to prove actual knowledge and the landowner is denying actual knowledge, that may be a very difficult obstacle to overcome. However, if you're in a situation where you can prove constructive knowledge, that's when you're really going to look at all of your photographs, your evidence, your witnesses that can testify, yeah, we knew that tree was a danger, that landowner should have known the tree was a danger, and that would create a duty for them to remedy that and prevent the harm from happening. So again, the things that you're going to look for are who owns the property, was the tree in a dangerous or defective condition, and then finally, was the owner on notice such that they had a duty to take action. For On Subrogation, we thank you for listening to this episode. If you have an interest in additional videos, please click subscribe and you can see additional topics that we've covered related to subrogation. If the tree falling case was of interest to you, check out our podcast that you can find at www.rathbonegroup.com. Click on the media tab and you can find podcasts, including one on falling tree cases that goes a little bit more in depth and covers the assumption of risk defenses with some interesting case studies. For On Subrogation, thank you for watching, and that's the long and short of it.